My message is titled Club or Community. And I recently read this blog titled, "The Church Increasingly Feels Like a Club to Which No One is Invited." Kind of goes along with the Halloween thing. No. I couldn't resist. But anyway, it went on to state that a growing number of people aren't sure how to engage in church. The sign on the lawn might say, "Oh, welcome," but that doesn't really register to some people. I mean, and think about it. The article said, if you're a practicing Christian, how comfortable would you feel randomly walking into a mosque next weekend, or a synagogue, or a Buddhist temple, right? First, you'd think you need an invitation to go, perhaps. That new people maybe aren't welcome. And we have some first-time people here today that maybe weren't sure about coming here. But second, he says, you're not even sure when they meet, how to dress, what the costumes are, what to do, where to go, and the list is endless, isn't it? So it's really no mystery as to why people aren't flocking to most churches. And I can assure you, he said, that to outsiders, churches can seem more and more like private clubs to which no one is invited, or you have to have a special invitation. But see, we know in Unity, and we've been saying this forever, that the bridge, of course, is a personal invitation. And that invitation is only likely going to be effective if the person you're inviting likes you and loves you. And that brings us back to the previous point. It's really hard for non-Christians to believe you love them if you behave like you don't like them. Those words are pretty intense, aren't they? But it always comes back to us and how we treat others and how we behave, actually, how we go out in the world and behave. So how do we treat other people that don't believe the same way we do? Are we understanding and kind? Or do we say, oh, you know how those Southern Baptists are? Yeah, we do sometimes, don't we? And I know in New Thought and in Unity that people do not like to be called Christians sometimes. And, they think, because they think that their idea of what a Christian is, or what maybe they have been raised with, has kind of blocked or skewed their vision of what that really means. We all like, though, to be called spiritual beings, don't we? We all like to claim that we are very spiritual. And we like to say we're not religious, but we are spiritual. Yeah. But, the founders of Unity and New Thought, the Fillmores, that's the Fillmores, Emily Cady, Dr. Quimby, and other great spiritual teachers, they all based their beliefs on the teachings of Jesus, believe it or not. And they took those beliefs and the teachings of Jesus, and they changed a new vision for people. They let people see, hey, this is what Jesus was teaching. He taught in parables and stories to protect the people of the time, but he was trying to teach us how to live in what we call in Unity, practical Christianity. How to go out and live the truth that we know to be true. And I think once we spark that Christ within ourselves, once we hear a little bit of capital T truth, we kind of get on fire about that, don't we? We kind of go, wow, this is what I needed to hear. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. And it takes us to a new place. And the thing is that Jesus taught that, and he showed us that in things that he did in his life. And he said to us that we can do this and greater. And that's the part we forget. We forget that we can do greater things than even what he was doing. And if we look around at the physical world, we know greater things are happening. Running water is a greater thing. And we can go into computers and technology and all that. Who would have ever thought when I used to go in the kitchen and pick up the phone and stretch that cord all the way around to the refrigerator so nobody could hear who I was talking to, that one day would be so obsolete that I would be able to pick up my cell phone, talk to everybody. And we hear everybody's conversations nowadays because of that, but that's okay too. But these great teachers helped us understand a new way to think about Christianity, a new way to think about the Christ within us. And that's what's so important. And they were actually Christians attending Christian churches. And like the Fillmores, they had their meetings on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock because they didn't want to interfere with morning church and they didn't want to interfere with evening church. But people that were coming to that 4 o'clock meeting were getting on fire. They wanted more and more and more. And that's where we are too. We come to Unity and we get more and more and more, and we want to learn more and more and more. We want to grow more spiritual, and we do if we activate that truth that is within us and believe that the Christ is within us. Jesus said that. He said the Father and I are one. And you and the Father are one. And you and I are one. And this is true Christianity. This was what Jesus was teaching. He wasn't saying, oh, I'm the great one doing all the miracles. And like Reverend Warren has pointed out numerous times, he wasn't the only one out there doing miracles and doing the things that were written about. Sometimes I think that Jesus was really a conglomeration of different people and the miracles that they were doing, and they decided to make it into one person so that the glorifying of those things would be more important to people. Or that they could say, oh, well, we're in with Jesus like this, so doesn't everybody want to be friends with the one? Haven't you ever met a movie? I met Dick Clark one time in an elevator, him and his wife. I went around telling everybody forever that I met Dick Clark and took pictures with him and stuff. We all want to be with the one that's famous or whatever. So they put the characters together and call it Jesus so that we could all say, oh, we're one with Jesus, and we're going to follow Jesus. But really, Jesus wasn't about that. He wasn't playing superstar. He was out there trying to get us to do what he had learned and what he was trying to share and taking it to the next level of consciousness. The thing was that label of Christianity didn't even come from Jesus. It came from people who saw the Christ in him and started talking about the light and the Christ and the love. And he was teaching that too. But I think the people that were in power eventually wanted to have that control, so they started saying, that you had to adapt to that, and you had to follow the teachings the way we teach them, and this is what we're going to do. And they did it for control, and they threw in what? Guilt and shame, right? And how many people have gone to a church where they taught guilt and shame? Yeah. And that took it to a whole different direction. But just because I call myself Christian, and some people don't in New Thought or anywhere, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. It's all okay. And it's all okay because we have to get away from labels defining separation. We have to quit thinking that those people are over here and those people are over here and we're right here. And we are the enlightened ones, right? And how many people are saying that at their church too? Instead of saying we can all be in this together. We can all be in this oneness together. Because all of us are, we just said what we want to be. We're all spiritual beings, right? Yeah. And if we believe that we're all spiritual beings, then we have to say that about everybody. Can you say it about a devout Catholic? Can you call them a spiritual being? Yes. What about a strong Baptist? Can you say that they're a spiritual being? Yes. And can you say that about people who are prejudiced against us? Yes. They're a spiritual being, yes, and that makes a difference. If you can hold the idea that you see them as a spiritual being, changes everything. It changes the consciousness of the universe, believe it or not. Sometimes it's difficult to claim that about people, though. Like, for example, the people that shot that officer yesterday. We still have to claim that they are a spiritual being, and we hope that they see a better way to live and a better way to be. But what they did was error thinking and wrong. And yet, they're still a spiritual being inside there. Still a spiritual being. We've got to get away from the kind of thinking that separates us from anybody else, no matter what has happened in the world. And we have to instead think about the oneness. Now, most of us, you got your hand up, Janelle?
Yeah, they're on the path.
Well,
even those people that shot someone, they're spiritual beings, but they're on the path.
Yes.
And that's what we have to remember.
Well, yes. I say the main thing we have to remember is that they're a spiritual being. They might not be living as a spiritual being, but they still are a spiritual being. And they might not be aware of how spiritual they are, but I'll tell you what, things change. And in every thought, you can instantly change what you're doing. But most of us were taught that there was the God up in the heaven, right? The old man, with the beard and all that stuff. passing judgment down on the earth. And you know, whether we believed it or not at that time, we probably had thoughts of fear and judgment a little bit, you know, and guilt instilled in our minds from the teachers who were supposed to be teaching us spiritual things. You know, I went to Catholic school and Catholic church, and we had to go into confessional every week, and, you know, I'd go in there most weeks making up stuff. I yelled at my parents. If I would have yelled at my parents, I would have been across the room, you know. So I would just make up stuff, you know, sometimes. Because I never really believed that even if I did something that wasn't quite right, I figured in that moment of feeling like I knew it wasn't right, that God made it okay, that God was not making it judgmental. But there's a lot of people that get hung up in that, get that instilled in their minds, and it's hard for them to move beyond that. And when you think about spiritual leaders teaching us those things, that guilt and that shame, that's a shame, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a shame that somebody can try to have that much power over somebody just because they want to have the control. But those thoughts of embedded theology that we have been taught, we can easily erase, believe it or not. We don't have to hang on to those untruths. We can focus in on the capital T truth, and it will start to erase that embedded theology. And then you can start seeing the humor in some of the stuff that they had taught you. You know, I mean, I was always taught I couldn't talk to God. I mean, some Catholic churches didn't teach that, but the one I went to, they taught I couldn't talk to God, that I had to talk to the priest, and the priest would talk to God. You know, and I was like, what? You know, I mean, we weren't even allowed to go to Jesus. No, we went to the priest, and the priest went to Jesus, and then went to God. So, and now I can laugh about that, but at the time, you know, you're a kid, and you're kind of thinking, how could this be true? You know, but you know, once you understand capital T truth, though, you know that anybody can go to God at any time. That whatever it is that we're practicing, whatever it is that we're living in our life, that we are moving through, that we are always one with God, so there is no separation. And if we believe that for ourselves, then we can't see separation from us and another person. Separations means we see God as separate from ourselves and everyone else, and that is duality, and it's an untruth. I love that this picture, because I think some people think there is this gap, you know, that you can't talk to God, you can't be one with God. But when we think about it like that, when we have that kind of mindset, it's kind of like being an outsider of a club, isn't it? You're kind of like, if you're thinking that you can't talk to God or whatever, you have separation from anybody else, that you don't see them as a spiritual being, that's like being outside of a club wanting to go in, and they say, no, you can't go in because you're not a member, you know, or you don't belong. But when we exclude ourselves from enjoying life like that, you know, all we have to do is change our thinking. And we can choose to always think divine and always think good. You see, God doesn't suffer. Does God? No. Neither do we on a spiritual level. We choose to suffer. We choose to experience pain. We choose to make the wrong choices. We choose to go and be hateful or unkind. And just in that same choice, at any moment of the day, it's easily flipped, isn't it? To where we can choose the kindness, we can choose the joy, we can choose making the right choices. And that puts us back in that idea of the oneness with God, and it's easier to accept the oneness with God when we can see the Christ in everyone. And again, that's what Jesus was teaching. Emily Cady wrote in Lessons in Truth. If you haven't read Lessons in Truth, it's a great book, and we've got it out there on the shelf. The moment that any man really comes to recognize that which is absolute truth, namely that one Spirit, God, ever lives at the center of all human beings, he will know that he can cease forever from any undue anxiety about bringing others into the same external fold that he is in. You understand that one? We don't have to worry about who's sitting in the seats today. Everybody that has been in this church has touched truth. It's still up to them whether they want to come back the next Sunday and experience more truth. But we know that they have experienced truth. And if your friend or your son or your husband or your brother does not see truth as you see it, do not try by repeated external arguments to convert him or her. Meaning, that's not saying that you should invite them to church, but what it's saying is your vision of truth might be different than somebody else's vision of truth. We are all on this spiritual level of where we're just spiraling and growing and lifting in consciousness. So where I might be on a spiritual journey might be here, and where you might be here. And we all might hit at the same place at the same time and ignite, but at the same time, there's lots of other people spiraling around on that spiritual journey. Doesn't mean they're less spiritual, doesn't mean they're more enlightened. It just means we are where we are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And believe it or not, this book Lessons in Truth was written in 1894. And she has such wise words and such truth. And she opens up a new perspective for us in this one, if we listen to it. It's kind of long too, sorry. Suppose that a dozen persons are standing on the dark side of a wall in which various sized openings. Viewing the scene outside through the opening assigned to him, one sees all there is within a certain radius. He says, I see the whole world. In it are trees and fields. And the next person says, through a larger opening, has a more extended view. He says, I see trees and fields and houses, and I see the whole world. But the next one, looking through a still larger opening, exclaims, oh, you are all wrong. I alone see the whole world. I see trees and fields and houses and rivers and animals. How many times have we felt like that with other people? Like we knew more than they know on a spiritual journey, or even in our life, which isn't true. The fact is, each one, looking at the same world, sees according to the size of the aperture through which he is looking. And he limits the world to just his own circumcised view of it. You would say at once that such limitation was only a mark of each man's ignorance and narrowness. Everyone would pity the man who thus displayed, I fairly vaunted, his ignorance. Because you see, when we start thinking that we are the only ones with this great view, there's somebody else out there with an even larger view. And some people get lifted up in that place where, okay, for example, Dalai Lama or the Pope or Mahatma Gandhi. Different people get lifted up to that place where we think that they are so spiritually enlightened that we can never be there. But I guarantee you that every one of us have been in the same place of enlightenment that every one of those people have been at some point in your lives. We might not always hold to it, but I bet if you followed the Pope around, he's not going to always hold to it either, or any of them. There are moments in our human condition that the human condition comes out. But there's other moments where the spiritual being is taking over and allowing us to be enlightened and live from that enlightenment. That's our goal. That's what we should strive for, is to ignite that spiritual understanding within us. It changes everything. And we have this whole spectrum of theology out there in the world that we know of. I mean, more and more people are finding out about other religions and stuff. And some people might see this much truth, and other people might see this much truth, and other people might see that much truth. But just even in the amount of truth this big, if you have seen capital T truth this big, I guarantee you have sparked something within you that will grow and urge you forward. It might urge you in all kinds of directions, trying to find what it is you're looking for, that desire in your heart, what you really want. When you stop and listen to more truth, you will find out that that truth is within you, and all you have to do is basically flip the switch on and off and say, hey, oh yeah, I can be enlightened too. I can allow myself to live from that spiritual truth that I've been taught. And your truth, again, might show up a little bit different than somebody else's, but that doesn't mean that we are limited in any way, because we live from that abundance of all there is, all knowledge, all power, if we're one with God, we have it all, don't we? We're, again, just looking through like this instead of looking at life through like this. I think every person's consciousness is ripe for activation. We all want to activate our consciousness to a new level. When we pray and meditate and we say, feel that light within you, that Christ light within you, I always like to think of it, in the love space, but some people think of it from their head. But when you think about activating that and sending it out, it is almost as if you can feel yourself open up and the energy pour out of you. Anybody else ever feel that way? I hope so, because that is what you're doing. You are just sending out the love and light of God. And that's why in Unity we call it a positive path for spiritual living. I think that's a great tagline, but it's also the truth. We are trying to live a positive path for spiritual living. So that's where we have to step back and look at our own ministry here at Unity East now that we understand what we're striving for and what we're looking at. But is Unity East a club or community?
Community.
Or is it both? I think most of us have belonged, maybe, not everybody, but a lot of people have belonged to a club, and you might have had to pay membership or dues, right? Yeah. I mean, it could be Lions Club, it could be Country Club or Dinner Club. It could even be a charitable organization like Lions Club, Bill's belongs to. Your neighborhood association is actually kind of a club, believe it or not, because you belong to it. You usually pay association dues. You have governing body, all that kind of thing. And the thing is that when we participate in a club, it's up to us whether we're going to enjoy it or not, right? It's up to us whether we're going to establish friendships and laugh and have a good time. But most of the time that happens, doesn't it? If you're in a club, you're usually there because you're liking who you're with. You're having fun. Or maybe you're doing good work. The Lions Club provides glasses and eye care for people. I mean, maybe there's something there that is sparking something within you, making you feel better. So there's good things about belonging to a club. And a lot of times it'll make you feel special, doesn't it? I mean, haven't you ever been somewhere where you told somebody, hey, I belong to such and such club? Believe me, I was there. I was in junior league, so everybody in junior league always says, "Oh, I'm in junior league." That's supposed to be, elite. But it was just, my girlfriend invited me, and I was, yeah, let's do it. And we did so much good work, and that's the part of it that I loved is all the good work that we did. And but it made you feel good. It made you feel a part of something bigger than yourself, and that's what church can be. But once you start feeling like if you're in a group, a club, and you're starting to feel better about yourself and you're feeling like you're a part of something important, then that's when the club becomes a community, right? That's when you feel like you need to go to those meetings. You need to go and participate in an activity because it's going to make you feel good. You're going to be with your people. You're going to have fun. I mean, the turnout yesterday for volunteers for the festival, even though the weather was not apropos, was great. We had a great turnout, I think. And that was because you all came together and felt good. And I saw pictures of you all being silly and laughing and in the photo op mask, those were what I was going to try to get up there. But some people might feel like this could be an exclusive club, and we don't want to feel that way, do we? We don't want to feel like, people can't come in and be welcomed. But, it's kind of like the question of the decades, there has always been a lot of discussion around why people show up for church and why people don't. And we have these discussions off and on, and it has been the mystery of the decades for churches. And every blogger out there is trying to come up with the magic formula to make your church grow and make, people show up. You're laughing, But, and that's the thing. And if somebody came up with a magic formula, and, I don't know what would happen. They probably would make millions. But I have a few theories about the whole idea of, having a church that is a community that welcomes people. And I think that one of my theories is I think a lot of times people don't come to church anymore, and some other people have said this too, because we don't have the guilt and shame. We don't make people feel guilty for not showing up. We're not checking them at the door and writing down whether their attendance was here or not, and all that. And I think that goes back to that idea of a judgmental God and people feeling, shame or guilt if they didn't show up for church. And most people aren't going to feel that way anymore. And I think also that people, don't have that fear that goes along with all that judgment and guilt. They're not fearful that they're not going to be one with God, or that God's still not going to that God's going to come down and tap them on the head. Now, I've heard people before say, oh, that happened because I didn't go to church. I just like, oh, come to our church if you feel it. But, again, you go back to that quote from Emily Cady. But people want to feel like they are in something greater than themselves. That's the point of clubs and organizations and even homeowners associations. You want to live in a neighborhood where you can tell people, oh, I live in this neighborhood and it's a great neighborhood, don't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we have the gate at the door. We have protection. We have all this. Yeah, it's all of that. But I think all we have to do is stay diligent about inviting, including, and empowering people, and that will make people want to come. And inviting them, you might say, yeah, okay, invite them, and, then that's all you have to do. Maybe you say, include them in an activity, and that's all you have to do. Empower them with knowing the truth that is within them, and that's all you have to do. You can come on in. It's all right. But if someone quits coming, all we can do is reach out again and invite them again. We keep the door open and receptive. We always do here at Unity East of Atlanta. And we hold the high watch for everyone, whether they are here or not. We send out that love. We send out those blessings. And we see the highest good coming forth for all. But if someone quits attending, there is always that possibility, believe it or not, and this is one of my theories, that they aren't ready for an organization that is more spiritual than religious. It could be true. They will feel that truth within them, but they don't really know how to take that to the next level. They might just not be ready to be in a spiritual atmosphere where it's up to them to ignite that truth within themselves. I mean, a lot of times religious organizations tell you what the next thing you need to do. In Unity, we believe that people know innately what the next thing is for them to do. And just like the daily word today, divine guidance will lead you in that place of knowing what the next thing it is to do. So once again, we find some wisdom from Emily Cady from 1894 that still applies today. From time memorial, there have been schisms and divisions among religious sects and denominations. And now, with the newer light that we have, 1894, now with the newer light we have, how many people feel like they have a new light now? Yes. Even the light of the knowledge of one God immanent in all men, many still cling to an external differences. So postponing instead of hastening the day of the millennium, at least they postpone it for themselves. 1894, she wrote that, and it's still true today. Are we postponing our own spiritual growth? Or are we saying, we are a community. We want you to be part of our club. We want to be in here together doing all that we can to help each other grow spiritually. That's what it's all about. I mean, I think that's the best community or club to have, don't you? Yeah, and all you have to do is go out and tell people, yeah, we have a spiritual club going on down there. Spiritual club, what's that? Oh, it's great. You'll love it. It's a great community. But when people quit coming and you've reached out to them and invited them and they still don't come, they are not ready to be here. They have not decided in their own consciousness that this is where they want to be. And unfortunately, the only thing that we can do is keep the space open and keep loving thoughts sent to them. But I like to think that the space that is open, even these empty chairs right here, they are waiting for the next person who is ripe and ready and on fire to be here. And when we start seeing these chairs as that, as an invitation for the person that is excited to turn on the truth, that wants the truth, that wants to say, I am a spiritual being, ripe and ready to be enlightened, then that's where the chairs will get filled. And we won't even have to think about it. Because that's what it's all about. It's all about seeing those chairs in the light of God, not as being, oh, there was nobody here today. Excuse me? There were a lot of spiritual beings here today. Aren't you all spiritual beings?
Yes.
Yes, and we could all name somebody that isn't here today that we would call a spiritual being, wouldn't we?
Yes.
So we have to invite them again. We have to include them again. We have to Let them know they're empowered to be in that chair that we have prayed up and said, that is ready and ripe for the next spiritual being. Can you see that with me?
Yes.
Can you hold that for every chair that is empty in this room right now?
Yes.
Hold it, because that's how we're going to get to here and get that space filled up there. This is the building for the new campus on Georgia 20. But, that's what it's going to take. We're going to have to start changing how we look through the hole and not see it as empty seats, but see it as that opportunity for somebody that's going to walk through that door and want to enlighten themselves and be in that spiritual mode and share it with somebody else. I think Adriana and Aaron talked to Reverend Warren yesterday, and I think they got on fire last week. And I'm so grateful for Giselle. But they filled up 2 seats today that I knew were ripe and ready for them. I hope they feel that still. Yes, I'll tell him, because he'll be excited. But that's where we have to be. We have to be in that mindset of looking like this at the room or the world or wherever. We can't look through our own little space and say what we see. Spiritual growth is not about them. And when it comes to inviting people, I always laugh when people say, oh, I invited them a couple times. Well, I tell on myself, and I've told this story before. If you've heard it, I'm sorry, but it's still funny. The lady who invited me for 10 years to go to her church. And I always said it was Verlene's church. Well, Verlene was talking about a unity church. And she knew I was ripe for spiritual growth because of the conversations we would have. She'd say, oh, you need to come to my church. Well, me, I was pretty independent back then. In your 20s or 30s, you're kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do it the way I want to. I know I'm a spiritual being. But anyway, she invited me for 10 years to come to her church. And the first Sunday I walked in there, besides somebody telling me I was in their seat and I had to move. But other than that, when I sat down and started listening, yes, it even happens at a Unity church. Okay? But the minute I sat down and started listening to the minister, I was like, oh my gosh, I am in the right place at the right time. That song, My Soul Is Welcome Here, was singing in my heart. I knew that capital T truth. And I came back the next week with the journal, and I was writing 90 to nothing every Sunday after that. And I can say that I haven't missed too many Sundays in my life since that first day. And I told Verlene, she's made her transition since then, but I told her, I said, I can't believe it took me 10 years, and she said it was the right and perfect time. So we never know when the right and perfect time is, but whenever it is, it will be the right and perfect time for anybody. And I say be steadfast. In the Bible it says, let's say it together. Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not vain. And what is the Lord? The I am. What is within us that we call the Christ. So be steadfast with what you know within yourself as the truth. Be steadfast with what you know as a spiritual being and share it with other people. Be steadfast in what you hold as truth. And in that, we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to see this as Unity East as an open and receptive and safe haven for anyone and everyone who chooses to grow spiritually. This is our community. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. God bless you. So we're going to sing. You guys like this song, don't you? It came to me